Hi, this is Happy Sattva, and I am coming to you today wanting to talk about the path of the heart and what we perceive about that. Have you ever walked a path where you're so confused about, well, let's start with an analogy. There's times when we can see where we want to go, and it looks really close, like here's our destination. And the clearest path there is straight from here to there. And we think that we'll get it. And we spend our whole day and all of our time aiming at this over here, trying to cut this corner to get right over to it, using all of these different methods that seem logical and seem like if we just do this thing, which we don't really want to do, and we have no attachment to this thing, but we can use it as a tool to get us to over here. And if we just do then that other thing that comes after this first thing that we do to get over here, then, we also have no attachment to that, and we have no hard attachments at all to it. But it's something to do. It's something we have to do just so that we can get this. But then after we do that, we realize, there's also, then we have to do these other things here, these other obligations that come upon us now because we're compromising what we really want. We're not automating that. We're automating all of these other things that are things we don't want in our lives. Thinking that if we just get through all of those things, then we'll get to this. And what ends up happening is our life is spent here. None of these things feed us or nurture us or are happy to our heart. Our heart's not happy doing them. But we spend all of our heart's energy. Well, it isn't our heart's energy. We spend all of our ego's energy, all of our physical self, all of our mind, occupying these tasks and these to-dos and serving these purposes. Where if we were to turn instead our ego and our mind towards what we originally had a heart's desire for, and spend all of our imagination and creative energy thinking about that thing and exploring ways of building our life towards that thing based off of what our heart really wants, it's a million then smaller decisions that we make along this path that, instead of saying, well, I don't really want to do that, but it leads me to this, so I'm going to do this thing even though this heart of mine doesn't want it. I'm going to do it because my heart wants that. So if I do this, I should get that. Instead of doing it that way, we start saying, well, I want that. And today, right now, my heart wants quiet. And so we give our heart quiet. Or today, my heart wants to meet with these people that I think also have this kind of thing going on in the back of their minds. And then we do that thing. We meet with those people. It might mean that our heart wants a cup of coffee, and we give it the cup of coffee. Or our heart wants to connect to nature, and so we spend our day connecting to nature. It might mean our heart wants to mend a bridge with somebody we have in our lives, and then we mend that bridge. It might mean that our heart wants to set a boundary with someone in our lives, and we spend our time setting that boundary. And all of these millions of little things that are only sponsored by what our heart really wants in a moment. It's those choices that get us through this journey that actually leads to the thing, that end goal that our heart really wants. It brings then all of this materialistic world into alignment with what our heart is wanting, because we're activating energy that supports the thing that our heart wants, because we're in alignment with our heart. It's interesting, the vibrations that we put out into the world. We can, when we are not when we're discrediting our heart's own wishes and we're busying ourselves with the things that we feel obligated or like we should do and that should lead us to something that don't actually nurture our heart, then what we're doing is we're putting all this vibration. It doesn't matter what we know our heart to want or what we're denying our heart and putting off until later. It doesn't matter if we understand that. What matters is the vibration we're putting out into the physical world. Because we're creative beings, our mind is like a thin membrane of the creative. So as long as a thought stays in our head and isn't activated through actions out into the world, it doesn't produce a thing that's in your head, right? And so once you start activating that idea out into the world through speech, through writing, through making those tiny decisions to align yourself better with your own heart. So those tiny things throughout your day, those little micro decisions. Once you start vibrating activation in the things that matter only to your heart in that moment, then the rest of as a reverberation out into the manifested world, out into the physical world, then all of the physical world starts vibrating back to you in a resonation with that thing that you're putting out. You start aligning without the labor of things we think, this should pay me off to this should do that. If I do that, then I should be able to get this, and I own this because I paid like this to do those things. Without the denial of our own heart, sending out vibrations that consequently we vibrate back into ourselves a world we don't love being in, we don't feel we belong in. Instead of obligating ourselves to those things, and instead we obligate ourselves to the things that matter only to our own self, in our own heart, and that matter in those moments to ourselves. Just those small micro choices, they send out a creative energy of vibration out into the physical world that then calls for the physical world to shift and balance and shake like sand on a table to the banging of your heart, right? Until it produces an image around you, flowing out from you, that is that thing that matters most to you. You then belong in unity with the environment around you, and it's a true integrity to your own self, instead of it being out of integrity, which would be taking a path of unloved, seemingly necessary, logical, or just unloving path for yourself. Instead, taking the loving path for yourself, you end up with a world that is balanced to yourself, because it was created by your own heart. So of course it belongs. Your heart feels it belongs there because your heart created it. And that is a magical power of humanity. And I think what we often do is we obligate our own creative magnificence towards others' goals, right? And we're obligating that through employment and through our relationships, and the way that we disguise our own and deny our own heart's feelings for the other things around us, and we put them higher than our own heart. We then are obligating our own creative energy to someone else's heart's desires, which will never satisfy us, right? We're not made for that. We're not made for them. We're not made for anyone else's dreams. Our creative energy is only nurtured in a symbiotic relationship when it is simultaneously producing and receiving from its own heart. So when we are producing from our own heart out into the world, we simultaneously receive back from the world equal measure of that loving space, and in that we have our happiest life. I'm Happy Sattva, and thank you for joining me.